This is week 13 in the NFL. And so
Oh boy.
this is exciting. But before we get into that, obviously last week we talked about the New York Giants and the poor managing of that team. I think we have a lot of the front office to blame for the morale of that team and that organization struggling. Obviously, ownership has not been the same since they last went to the Super Bowl.
Uh,
Um, it's been a decade, and the team has not really been a very professional football team contributing or even deserving of the sponsorship that sponsors that organization because they're just not putting out good product. And that just tells me that the ownership is a little too trusting with the people he put in the front office. Um, how many head coaches they've had since?
this the past conference you got Ben McAdoo, you got Pat, you got so much, you got but Dick Ball now, you got but he might be gone this year with the
Well,
maybe
look,
five.
Look,
Five
I'm gonna honestly say, look, rightfully so now. So even though he's a good head coach, he wasn't standing up for his players in the sense he should have been. With the front office making some of the poor decisions they were making, there have been head coaches that have literally lost their job because they tried to defend their players and help them get good contracts and things of that nature. Part of being a head coach is you're on the field, you're in the locker rooms with those men, and sometimes the GMs, they're not. Some of these GMs are just
yeah.
strictly about dollars and cents. They're disconnected from the reality of the people that's in the locker room. And it's your job as a head coach is to really to inform these guys of what's going on and who's valuable, who isn't. So, although he has a pretty good coaching style and he's trying to build something right for the organization, when you have somebody that's between you and the ownership, uh, that's giving you, bad information, it just tells you that the guy was disconnected. We got to see it all on Hard Knocks uh, in the off season, and we know what's really happening inside that organization, which is sad. Um,
Uh,
so we're gonna see what happens if I was the ownership at this point because he was basically not as involved as he should have been. And I get it. You hire people to come in and you want to be able to sit back, but sometimes he needs to put back on his business hat if he's capable. He is up there in age,
yeah.
but maybe he needs to put back on his business hat. I mean, look, his family's had control over the New York Giants forever. He knows football. It's not that he doesn't know football, and he knows deep down inside his gut, you know, um, what's right for that franchise, and that's what needs to be focused on. And it's sad, but yeah. Bears let go of their head coach. What's your thoughts on that?
We know that it comes he what not a good head coach, but good. Issue that and for me, uh, I I got the movie we I think I yeah from week. For me, it's eat, but we yeah, not with a beer. So um yeah, he like it not a good 14-32 he like it's clear. I I call Polka Bear for for 2 years, 2.5 years with a beer.
Yeah, but they didn't
No,
have they didn't have their quarterback. They had the one key piece now that they needed to start building something. And the season started off right for them. So you kept him all this time. I believe it was a big mistake. I think they should have kept him. And unfortunately, even with letting go their offensive defensive coordinator in the middle of the season, I thought was a bad a bad decision. Look, the team had some really close games. Just think about it. If they won those games, what would their record be right now? This team was on the verge of making the playoffs this year and still was kind of technically in the hunt for the playoffs. And you prematurely decided to let them go. So, again, this goes to front office meddling when they shouldn't, making poor decisions when they shouldn't. I think the decision making should be left up to the coach at the end of the day and his staff are what's best for the team because they're the ones in the locker room. They're the ones there with the practice. These are the people who are closest to the players. And if the coach is pushing for those things, that's a different story. To let go of your offensive defense coordinator, because that means the coach is failing. And that's different. That means the coach feels like, you know, one of his members on his staff isn't capable. But to simply have these changes happening at a time when you have a young quarterback, his first year, now you're damaging him because there'll be new coaching, new offensive coordinator come in, a whole new style of playing. It's not what's best for the franchise. You want to keep that young mind, his talent, focused. I just think it was a bad decision. And if they were going to make decisions, I agree, it should have been at the end of the year, not in the middle of the season. Um, we seen what happened when the Jets let go of their head coach.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, they let him go. Bad, you did it, and look, now the team ended up being emotionally unstable.
Yeah, well,
Just not the same as having the leadership there. If you're going to do something, it should have been done at the end of the season. Um, just horrible decision making at this point. And
oh,
uh, if I was the NFL, if I was Roger um, Goodell, I would say something because look, you're trying to promote a product, right? And you have all these teams in all these cities, and the fans spend a great deal of money to an organization. Plus, there's organizations within the organization, right? So you have the NFL, which is the parent company, and then you have all these other companies within the company. So if you think of it as a business, you literally are just basically killing a company within a company um, for your own personal, because whatever the circumstances are. I just think it's bad. I think it's bad for the fans. I think it's bad. I mean, not unless the coaching is so god awful and the players are being injured and they're not healthy, things of that nature, then yeah, okay, this is not good. But because you're having a bad season, because you're being out coached, or the other teams have better choices in the draft and they have better players, their staff better, then that's on you. Then you make plans in the off season to get better. But to literally fire a coach because of mismanaging the clock. Like I said, I know we wasn't on camera at the time, but you know what? I can't count how many coaches around the league have had that incident happen and never lost their job. Some of those coaches are still coaching, like Andy Reid. So, I mean, that is unheard of, and it's sad. But
yeah,
um,
it could be let go, Matt, even food, ah, about so the week, when you think about it, they put a schedule formal network.
quarterback,
uh,
yeah.
How do you feel?
Well, look, I think, I mean, look, he found a place that I think will be a good home for him. It's a winning organization this season, so he's going to get a feel to know what that's like. Because remember, when he came to the New York Giants, the Giants were struggling, and he was picked in the first round, right, by the New York Giants. And so obviously they wasn't a good team. So he went to a team that was struggling, and they had been struggling for the last six seasons that he's been there. So now he's going to go to an organization. He'll probably have some understanding of what it's like to be on a team that's actually winning. And maybe if they have a good quarterback coach or a good offensive coordinator that can help him develop the skills he need, because again, this goes to how many different coaches come in, how many different systems you have to learn, right? And that ruins a quarterback. And although we know Daniel was not at the same elite quarterbacking level as Eli Manning. Um, and things of that nature. He wasn't averaging the same amount of yards. He wasn't averaging the same amount of touchdowns per season. Like he's just not that level of a quarterback. And the Giants knew this after the third season with Daniel, but they hung in there and they still decided to pay this man, 40 million a year, even though his stats show he was not, at that level as a quarterback. Um, and so hopefully now that he's with Minnesota, maybe he can turn into a much improved quarterback. And maybe Minnesota get a gift, you know, and we'll get to see what Daniel Jones is really capable of, being with a winning organization.
Okay, so that recap of our that recap of that game. We have three games that is
Yes,
that,
that
that,
that
that,
uh
uh,
that took place.
that is what the foot game.
Actually, you had 4 games because you had a
Yeah,
Friday game with the Chiefs and Raiders, so let's not forget them. So let's
oh
go back
yeah,
to
oh
the very
yeah,
first game.
the Bills and Detroit. Um,
Wait,
that
wait, how did you get to the Bills in Detroit?
Bear and Detroit, Bear and Detroit.
Yes.
The foot game. The time me put on like a headphone, but like a factor. Um, yeah, poor. I feel bad for
Um,
poor Bear.
but
There.
look, I mean, and just to show you his coaching ability, right? So they were down at halftime
Yeah.
and they were being tore up. I mean, Detroit was doing all kinds of things to them in that game. So if he was such a bad head coach, they would have never been able to make the comeback to be in that game at the very end, have the last possession. I mean, that comes to coaching to get your men's mind set straight to go, okay, look, we're down and here's what we need to do to come back. And Chicago did just that. And they ended up being in that game at the very end, um, and had a chance to win it. Unfortunately, you have a rookie quarterback and whatever calls were being called in at the time, whether there was something wrong with the microphone in the helmet, whatever it was, they didn't get lined up fast enough to manage the clock and get themselves in a better position. And this is sad, but these things happen. That's the reality of living in the world we live in. People make mistakes and these things happen, unfortunately. But they were in the last 4 to 5 games that they win. Nobody just blew them up. They didn't get blown out by these other teams that they played against. They were in those games, every single one of them. And so the guy obviously was a good head coach. Unfortunately, sadly, the organization made a mistake, I believe. That may come back to haunt them. Second game of the day was against the Giants and Cowboys. Surprisingly, the Giants did show up, even
But
with
without a quarterback.
without a quarterback, but they showed up and they played against the Cowboys and they actually were motivated in that game. That impressed me because after the week before of getting beat up by the Bucks, that these guys got themselves together. Again, this gives kudos to the head coach because you had to get that team mentally ready to play, even though their locker room and everything is just it's heartbreaking right now for those players. Because all they want to do is win. And
Mm-hmm.
then he got them mentally ready and they showed up and played. Unfortunately, they did not get the victory at the very end. Um,
I, the,
and so the Cowboys moved on and won
the
that
time,
game.
the time, the first team that a little bit back to put up.
So,
The
yes,
first
the
team
very
out.
first team mathematically eliminated from any playoff chance. They are technically declared the worst team right now in NFL. Um, and as in a giant organization, this should be very disturbing to them that we're now in, the 12th season or 12th year of not being able to be a competitive team, not only in their own division, but in the league altogether. And this is sad that the ownership has allowed this team to slip back after all the decades of what that team has represented, one of the oldest franchises in the NFL, to not be a competitive team. And this is why I think when they have their off season and all the owners get together or what rules and stuff they're gonna change, this should be a conversation. Maybe that he needs to sell, just like Washington needed to sell because after dude's father passed away, that franchise was never the same, and it went on for many years of being a struggling franchise. Now he sells the team. The team is being a competitive team, new ownership, new everything. This is what the NFL need to do when you have owners that are trying to just hold on to these teams because they're living in their glory days in their mind, and the team is not living to those glory days physically in reality in the year that they're in. It's time that the league stands up and say, hey, look, maybe you need to sell. We need a fresh face, a fresh perspective. We need these organizations to be competitive year in and year out. Maybe that was needs to be talked about with all the other owners in the off season. But somewhere along the line, something needs to change because none of these franchises, with the biggest sport in America, which is football, the amount of ratings and everything that it brings in, the amount of money that it brings in, the direction that the NFL is going, you can't have teams looking like this. It's one thing when they have a bad season, it's another thing when it's 10 or 12 or 14 years of just being a bad franchise. That should never happen. Somebody's got to throw the flag and say, hey, you know what, timeout. It's time for us to make a change here because this is not what we want to see as an organization and an entertainment um, thing. The third game was Packers and Dolphins. Um, Dolphins did show up to play, but unfortunately, the Packers was just a little bit too much for them, and the Packers ended up winning that game.
And then
And then we had a Friday game, which was basically on
catch it.
ESPN Monday Night Football, whatever you want to call it, basically on a Friday. And that was the Chiefs and Raiders, which ended up being a great game. But again, we had chaos at the very end of the game. And this goes to the officiating. Now, for fans who know the sport, we know that that was a false start, and that should have basically been a flag for false start. And even though there was a turnover there, the ball should have went back to the Raiders if the penalty was being accepted. And then the game should have continued. But unfortunately, the officials called an illegal shift, and it ended the way it did. And that leaves a bad taste in not just the viewers who are at home watching, but the people who are sitting in those stands that spent all that money. I mean, all they want is unlimited football. And you basically prevented maybe a possible overtime or victory from the Raiders if if you had just gave that ball back. But what's your thoughts on the on that ending to that game?
Oh, uh, I get a really interesting all the captain in glass company all the captain in the always key in the focal eye or that back with the top three of the key so moving moving the palm home time to our key we open the here is a team that is team before captain E we are attack we are attack to get the ball with the uh probably compared with the top boy that is the bigger uh uh, uh with the they would you be always far away to make it in if you put up I know it's a cat movie it I don't know movie doesn't go all up up but I mean to he was he was a book but I don't know yeah it's a time to cat always cut away eh 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 good almost win that game but it always he is
Yeah, I know. Last year's game. the Raiders beat them physically, mentally, and they took the game to them and they won that game. And I kind of seen that happening once again in this matchup against the Raiders. And then you have officiating that stepped in. And I got news for you officials. You know what? The Chiefs don't need your assistance. They really don't. Honestly, they got a good head coach. There's great talent on that organization. They don't need your assistance. Those guys they know football, they can play football. You just need to play the game or coach or officiate the game fairly and what's right. And if you're in New York and you're watching these things, you need to chime in a little bit more and say, hey, wait a minute, that's a bad call. Because again, it's the fans that matter at the end of the day. And yes, the players who are putting in all the efforts, trying to
Oh, yeah.
stay healthy, to compete and everything else. But the fans is what matter. You're going to end up pushing people to a point where they're going to boycott. They're going to get tired of and it's always on the same franchise. It's not like these things happen around the league. It's always the same franchise. And if I'm officiating and I know that I'm in that game and I know it's the Chiefs, I have to be careful to make sure I'm making the actual right call. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah,
don't want that stigma put on me and my fellow official team that's officiating that game.
yeah,
But now you're creating people looking at you and they're saying, "Hey, you guys are, maybe you guys are fixed. Maybe you guys are compromised with Las Vegas or something because the decision making of calling a bad call is just wrong. I'd rather you take an additional commercial to make sure you get the call right than to go ahead and make a call that's going to be devastating
he
and a memory that the fans are not going to forget."
it was caught when you look and the competition again. Okay, so so the quarterback like for the football in the point be back to
Yeah, it should have been a safety.
we go come right we
Yes, and we come
back
back. I mean, I'm sorry, it should have been a touchback. And then we
we
come back and then,
the
you
top
know,
back the ball come on.
and they score. And you took a game that a team who was already struggling, by the way, just completely deflated them like you just played a football. It's sad.
Now come on. The point
So,
be football. Pick it up and you we see we see top three call football but no. Ah, it's can't find that give back the ball if that give it no good deal.
oh, the
But
Giants are already losers anyway, so who cares?
yeah,
All right. Like, this team ain't going anywhere. Let's just rob them anyway. Let's just take this away from them. I mean, it's just horrible, some of the officiating that took place this season. But
now
let's get
wait a
into our
minute.
picks.
Wait,
Okay.
I go I'll put continue I'll put um my 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 league out. They can't make it normal. So now go into our pick. Go go ahead.
Okay. So the first 1 o'clock game is Patriots Colts. These two teams used to be in the same division years ago. Then they were moved out when the NFL made a restructure. They still just have these one games a season, which is I think is great because they was great matchups when they were in the same division. They were division rivals. So you have the Patriots and Colts. Who's your pick?
I they picking the call every call it gonna be a potato uh put our team in the put our for the change for the end for me give me the call.
Okay. I'm gonna take the Colts in this matchup. Next matchup is Cardinals Vikings. Um, this is always a weird matchup between these two teams. They usually put on a pretty good show when they play each other every once in a while. You now have Daniel Jones on the Vikings, and you have the
Okay,
Cardinals.
okay.
Both are trying to make it into the playoffs. So
both teams are looking for a complete uh, but for what now, you gotta give me the cut me the game. Yeah.
So yeah, the Cardinals do need this victory to stay ahead of Seattle and the 49ers and the Rams. That division is kind of tight, even though
Yeah.
it's a struggling division this year, but they're all of them are within a half a game of each other. And so the Cardinals do need the game. But I'm gonna take the Vikings. I think the Vikings hold on and keep this victory because they're trying to keep pace with the Packers and the Lions.
Oh,
Next up is Seattle and the Jets. The Jets are in their black uniforms today. They look ready to play this game. You got Geno Smith coming back to basically play against the New York franchise that actually drafted him in the first round. So, what's your thoughts on this game?
uh, uh, yeah.应该跟我我no，那个 out，那个 out 那个 put out，没没没那个 out but for we if we take the out. So for me, I go a bit. It got be go be me coming back to New York. Get advantage.
So now this isn't the first time he's matched up with them since he's been with
Yeah,
Seattle. So he's got his revenge before. But Aaron Rodgers wasn't there in those
yeah.
times. Um uh look, Aaron Rodgers played Seattle in the Super Bowl. so um look, at the end of the day, no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. Take that back. Um he's matched up well when he was with the Packers against Seattle. And so let's just say, I'm going to go with the Jets on this. I think the Jets is going to pull out a victory here. This will tighten up that division even more. Because if the Cardinals lose and the Seahawks lose, Rams get a victory today, and then the 49ers lose. Oh boy, how the end of these next 4 weeks are going to be telling who's going to win the division and who will sneak into the playoffs. So but that's just my thoughts on that. Um, okay, next 1 o'clock game, Titans Commanders.
If this game is a big game for what it is. They have a good really go the from again back after
After having a great start, yes.
it's not a big for what is the side looking for a competing with the eagle and you know what the part ain't going nowhere. Not they got out yeah, but for us we can cook it.
They
Uh,
they ain't got nothing to lose, in other words.
yeah.
So
So give me that thing over what is it? I believe I believe that thing we get up there over what is it.
I'm gonna go with the Commanders. I think the Commanders will pull us out. I think they bounce back this week. I think they understand how valuable this game is because they've fallen back right now behind the Lions and Eagles, which are the two leading teams in the NFC conference. So I think if they want to keep that third seed of being right behind those guys, otherwise Minnesota or the Packers are going to leapfrog them. And so they got to do what they need to do today. Okay. Chargers, Falcons are now these two teams rarely play each other. This is kind of like one of those funky games. Both are pretty decent game teams. Both are trying to maintain a playoff picture for their teams. Obviously, the Falcons are leading in that division, so there's implications in this game against the Chargers. So, what's your thoughts?
I get wait uh, I get a trying to co up, co up with Kansas. They're trying, they are really trying to compete with a team that is that is Super Bowl back to back. Trying to go back to back Super Bowl. For me, the fact you need to win because the Buccaneers are behind them, but I think it's going to be um LA over the Falcons. I
Okay.
think Jim Harbaugh will get it done. Absolutely.
I think I'm gonna agree with that. I think the Chargers do get it done after that loss
Over
the other
over
night.
over Harbaugh.
Yes, the hardball matchup. So um I'm gonna go with the Chargers. Plus, this will make that division tighten up um, versus the Falcons and the Bucks. Because if the Bucks are able to win today against the Panthers, now they can leapfrog them and be at top. So that means that division will be action packed this month of December to see who actually will be the division title holders this year. So I'll take Chargers. Okay, Texans and Jags, another division rival.
I
Uh,
guess
the Texans have not been playing their best football lately. They've been kind of struggling. Do the Jags get them today?
I guess that's through they could be out of the pit of her um not a good for that actually the this game that are ma- mathematically out of the pit of. So um the game I get that for who is who we got because the not that the coach is looking for taking that number one spot in that division. The big game again for for Houston. So and it could win I think that division is gonna be tight. So for me, give me give me Houston. After you get done, after Johnson will be out of the playoff by tonight. How it is.
I'm going to take the Texans. I think the Texans bounce back um, to try to keep that lead in that division. This is a division rival. I know they know how important this game is. And this month of December is going to be telling who's going to be strong and weak going into the playoffs. So okay, the last 1 o'clock game is Steelers Bengals, and boy, is this always entertaining, a huge appetite type of game. And although their records are completely opposite of each other, they always show up to play. So who do you got?
Look, look, that's so cool. They make a playoff. They got out. They got out for the count. Uh, they are number three. Is that number eight? Behind, behind Baltimore. So, they got back the room today. They got out. Uh, they got out of the playoff, but they need a help to get into the playoff. Uh, they, this team fall apart from the game. We can't see, we can build, with Pittsburgh, um, with Baltimore. This, that team, the victim, yeah, help. I got them in defense. They need to drive. They need to pick up a couple of good defense players. So for me, give me Pittsburgh, I believe Pittsburgh will get it done at the home of Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Bengals here. I know, I
You,
know it's
you
crazy. I
all,
know you keep telling me, that every time I pick them for this, but you know something? I believe that they're gonna get this upset against the Steelers. This is gonna be entertaining because and this is gonna come back to my pick at the end uh, of the 4 o'clock games, which is why I'm saying this because again, I'm looking at entertainment, excellent matchup. And so the fight for that division is going to come down to two teams. And so I think Steelers lose, Bengals win today. Um, and so now we're going to move on to the 4 o'clock games and you have Bucks versus Panthers at 4:05. I
Yeah.
expect the Bucks to win this game. Even though I know the Panthers will show up to play against them and make it challenging, but I think the Bucks itch this game out by 3 points.
A heartbreaker, a heartbreaker for Panthers fans that again can't um uh, again the Panthers for we call the Panthers out, but the are out there. The angry out there. If if the Panthers want to want to make it easy to put this, this game is big for the Panthers. Um and comparing it I have with that they need to practice today. They need to they need to stay today. And to get the lead over the Buccaneers. So again, compared from the out, I can put off, but then I have that's the some missing new some missing the week to have compared with. It could happen with the before.
Yes, especially
Uh,
in that division because that division had some issues. I mean,
yeah,
look, the Bucks got into the playoffs. I think was they 7-9 one
yeah.
year, and so they almost caused some trouble in the playoffs once they got in. So it was kind of weird seeing that, but yeah, it's still a possibility in that
Anything
division.
can happen.
So
Give me compare
uh,
with the game.
okay. Um, okay, so the next 4 o'clock game is Rams and Saints. Um, Now, I know you don't know these two franchises as far as their history towards each other. There has been a point in time where these two teams used to always be antagonized by each other when they match up. Obviously, if you remember the bad call with the pass interference by the
Yeah.
officiating. So there's history between these two franchises, and so this isn't just a normal matchup. So Saints Rams, who you got?
Look, I just put it down. I just put it down. Compare for team. So, because that day, um, it, they are not going to put we don't need to put it down. Um, so they are, I believe, still the free attack, the free surface. Surface that right. The that, yeah. Yeah. Give me comment, I believe, absolutely we get it going. Something at football. It's big. So give me comment, I believe that too, and it will hopefully that from the team that hopefully is just but I believe we got that this week.
Yes, I agree. I mentioned it earlier. I think the Rams will get this victory while the Cardinals and um what you call it will fall, making that division a little bit more tighter uh, on who may end up winning that division. And then, of course, the last 4 o'clock game is the Eagles versus the Ravens, which I think is going to be one of the best entertaining games today. I can't wait to see this game. I'm pretty sure you're super excited. A lot of Eagle fans are just freaking out right now. Just this is gonna be a great matchup. Um, these two teams were on this collision course. Boom! Oh man, I can't wait.
So, someone can take it because I talk about to
Okay,
both teams.
so all right, so this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. I think the Eagles get this victory over Lamar Jackson and his Ravens, and the Eagles will show that they're going to keep on pace with the Lions until they get to the playoffs and these two teams square off to see who is the best NFC team. Um, but if the Ravens lose today and the Steelers lose today, this tightens up that race between those two, and that means, oh man, who's going to win that division is going to be just so juicy and delicious. If the chips fall in that manner, I just think that's going to be telling for the month of December. So we're gonna see. But that's my pick.
Well,
Eagles over Ravens.
and now let me go into the detail. Uh, before before we go into the detail, I'm picking my team. So, uh, but now I go into detail of both before my bit could be get out the ear. I know I know we talked about it like a build a cat game, but this could be get out the ear. So, uh, let's jump into detail. Baltimore, what about the Harry? What they come up with to to all time what about in this league so far to quarterback her and more beautiful but but quarterback that the two good has quarter Nick and your hot boy Nick our boy this is this team we gonna be so nice to watch. It could be really interesting to tell if the Eagles are for real. If Baltimore is for real. We got former team that is picking that if Baltimore win, um, they have Wharton, they have Detroit, they have former team in the AFC, in the AFC, in the Eagles win. They have Pittsburgh, they have the Bills, they have Kansas, they have the Bills. This game, this could be a good football game. In the playoff, we got see. So I really, I can't wait to watch the game of, of of the count. I can't wait to watch the game, the full game. So we're gonna move on to
now
something
now
football.
wait. Now
Yeah,
remember Dante has that hamstring.
yeah,
So we don't know if he's gonna play or not. That will matter in this game.
yeah.
So um
Uh,
let's
uh,
just hope that he's able to play without tearing it or having any issues or
and
complications because that could hurt you guys going into the playoffs. So let's
and
just see what happens.
and that week we got decent one decent lineman. But
Yes.
he got the apple without ear. His
Yes.
his phone his apple. Uh, it's a good to talk to, but it's really no it gonna be all out to talk. So
Yes. Um, and
we not move
so,
on to something.
okay, so the Sunday night game, then this would have been a great matchup if the 49ers were a much healthier team and they were playing with the same level of football they played last year. That is not the case. They've had some internal problems there with these guys staying healthy. I know some fans, if you really are big football fans, if you go all the way back to when um, Tom Coughlin was the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, he was a really hard head coach back then. A lot of players were playing with injuries. They couldn't stay healthy. There was even lawsuits. And then he went on to New York afterwards, where it started off being the same way, but then the team came to him and said, "Look, no more." Maybe, the 49ers, are having similar situation with these guys being able to stay healthy. Maybe the coach just a little bit of our coach on them, and their bodies are just not able to hold up. But for the amount of injuries this year, it's insane. They were having injuries before the season even started. So it has to tell you this has to do with training and the physicality of the team. They're just not able to live up to being what the 49ers were the last few seasons. But with that being said, I'm going to pick the Bills to take this victory. They are playing at a level right now. I think they want to stay ahead of the Chiefs. They're only, even though they got that victory against them, they're only a half a game ahead of them in that aspect. So, um, because they beat them. So I think they realize they're technically first place in the AFC as even though the Chiefs have a better record. So let's just say the Bills realize they got to keep pace.
For me, I'm gonna take the big bill. I believe the bill will probably get that. It doesn't know football. It gonna be cold and salty. It update you the remember the phone the put the in the echo. But
Well,
also
that's wait, that's not true. They've always played well, believe it or not. They because remember, San Francisco is in the hills, they're in the mountains. So out of the California teams, yes, they can actually play pretty well in cold weather. So I wouldn't put that label of stigma on them because they've had plenty of games in New York against the Giants and back in the day as an organization, yeah, they can hang in the cold. So
but be, before you is looking at football the bill if they live tonight the bill will make it a single put uh math not how I go at the kept we forgot something captain cringe our is that back is fighting at football our prime so I'm looking at football who put it on looking at football.
So Monday night is the Browns and Broncos. That's who playing, and those two teams usually play well against each other. Again, there's history there. There was even a playoff game between these two teams years ago in the AFC Championship. So there's definitely not a good feeling when these two teams play. But I'm going to take the Broncos over the Browns, even though the Browns got a huge victory over the Steelers a week ago. So
Again, the ball comes the ball comes up there and they got to put the back the it's so playing again. Shot and can't it could that is come to call to a for call. So we got but give me a block I believe a block we get the action it's about promoting it about it I'll put her mathematically. So
oh, yeah. And then we have Thursday night football, folks.
yeah,
Be
both
kicking off
games,
week 14, which
both
is
games
yes, which would be the Packers and Lions, a division rival. This should be
again.
probably a fighter dagger if I believe the Lions with this victory against the Packers. I think that's it. They definitely own the division. There won't be nothing else left to stop them from clinching at that point. And so,
Again,
and it'd be a first time in their
yeah,
franchise history to be 12-1. They
yeah,
did a first time ever against the Bears when they made it
yeah.
to 11-1, even though that was the Bears doing it to themselves. But the Lions made it to 11-1. Congratulations to them. First time ever as a franchise. So let's see what they bring to the table against the Packers.
I know something that game again. I know something game against Detroit. I know it was back to back. Lucky dog. Um, yeah. So yeah. This wrap up we 14 pig out of Brittany in a in in that the beginning uh, a quick a quick recap of what happened in the beginning of our team um the young weapon Gluttony the bear for the head coach uh after the different game against Detroit with Harvard New York how bad the or this year and we talked the Grinter, we talked the
I'm
we
sorry.
talked the we, we talked the captain. He again another game for captain. Um, we talked I like the talk the top game against New York, Vicky, and we talked about the Miami game. Miami can't get there, and we so if New York there, you can go back and how good week of football. We next week is gonna be week 14 again. Your game. Um, uh, and if and it will call your game and you can go back to more 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 you can go back home. So yeah, we gotta go. Can't we? For the Eagle game, can't we? I can't wait for week 14. Yeah, I can't believe. I
Yeah,
can't believe it.
I'm
If
surprised you're not wearing all your Eagles gear today.
I, I go to I can't wait to week 14. Joke game. If Hello Coach kick off, we gotta go. We gotta watch football. Joke game. And we
Yes.
and all we have week 14. Don't forget to uh I will post a real update about the game. And so yeah, we gotta go. Football on. Uh, we got we the uh after nothing in football for week 14. Yeah,
All right, folks, tune in to this Eagles Ravens game. I promise you, you're not going to be disappointed. It should be one of the best games today. That's at 4. So I'm excited for today's football. The playoff picture is starting to form pretty well. We're going to see some pretty entertaining football coming up in the next few weeks, going into this off season. So
and put
I'm excited. So thank you guys for tuning in. This is week 13 of Sports Talk with Alice and Felix. And so we'll see you guys next weekend.
yeah.